The Arizona desert in 1886 stretched like a vast, unyielding expanse of red sand, its surface rippling under the merciless glare of a midday sun that transformed the horizon into a shimmering mirage of heat and desolation. Sunburn Flats, a remote farmstead nestled between rugged mesas and scattered creosote bushes, baked under a sky devoid of mercy, its cracked earth whispering tales of survival, loss, and resilience amid the harsh wilderness. James Harrow stood outside his weathered barn, his broad shoulders stooped beneath a sun-faded shirt patched with rough stitches, his boots worn thin from years of solitary toil across the arid plains. At 43, his face was a rugged map of lines etched by grief and isolation, a faint scar across his right temple, a memento of a plow accident that had nearly claimed his life 2 winters past. His hat, battered and sweat-stained, shaded hazel eyes that carried a quiet despair. A man alone since his wife succumbed to fever, and his crops withered under drought, leaving him with a pitchfork, a rifle, and a heart heavy with unhealed wounds that haunted his every step. He'd come to the barn to repair a sagging beam, the dry wood splintering under his calloused hands, a task that felt more like a futile gesture than a necessity for a farm teetering on ruin. The fields lay barren, the livestock reduced to a single mule, and the silence of the flats had become a companion to his growing resolve to endure alone. As he hammered a nail, a sound pierced the stillness, a faint, muffled sob, barely audible over the wind, emanating from the barn's shadowed interior. He turned, his hand instinctively on his rifle, and froze. There, chained to a post in the dim light, was a woman, her slender frame hunched beneath a tattered dress of faded buckskin, her dark hair matted with dust and sweat, her wrists raw from iron shackles, her brown eyes wide with a mix of terror and defiance. Her presence was a shock, an enigma in his solitary world, and her plight stirred a memory his wife, lost to illness, a loss that had left him hollow and questioning his purpose. Henry dropped his tools, rushing to her side, his hands gentle as he examined the chains. "I'm James Harrow," he said, his voice gruff but kind. "Who did this?" The woman, her voice weak but steady, replied, "I'm Alara, Outlaws Blackjack's men. They took me for ransom." With a grunt of effort, he pried the shackles loose with his pitchfork, the rusted metal yielding to his strength, freeing her trembling form. He helped her to a stool, using water from his dwindling barrel to clean her wounds and wrapping her wrists with strips torn from his shirt. Alara watched him, her trust a fragile thread, her gaze searching. "Why help me?" she asked, her voice hoarse. James met her eyes, his scar itching under the sun. "Lost my wife once to this land's cruelty. Can't leave you to die like that." Alara's lips tightened, but gratitude flickered in her expression, a reflection of a life shaped by hardship and hope. As he worked, the farm's quiet shattered once more. Hoofbeats approached, not with the menace of raiders, but with a steady rhythm that spoke of purpose and numbers. James grabbed his rifle, Alara rising with a makeshift crutch from a broken beam, and peered out to see them. A band of Apache riders, their faces painted with earth tones, their spears and bows glinting in the fading light, led by a tall man with a commanding presence. He dismounted, his buckskin attire adorned with faded beads, his dark hair tied back with a leather strip, his face lined with the strain of survival, his brown eyes meeting James's with a mix of gratitude and wariness. "I'm Chato," he said, his voice deep. "Alara is my sister. Thank you for freeing her." James lowered his rifle, his heart pounding, found her chained, brought her in. Chato stepped closer, his hands steady as he knelt beside Alara. "Raiders attacked our village, took her for leverage. We've been tracking them since." He embraced his sister, relief cutting through the dust on his face. James's mind raced. Raiders meant trouble, and this man's arrival confirmed it. "Stay," he said, the words slipping out. "You're safe here." Chato's eyes narrowed, assessing him. "Why take us in? Men like you often take, not give." James shrugged, his scar prickling. "Lost my family. Can't turn away yours." That night, the farm buzzed with quiet activity. Alara ate sparingly from a plate of dried cornmeal James prepared, her strength returning, her presence a disruption to his solitude. Chato tended the fire, his hands skilled, his warriors unloading supplies, blankets, tools, food stacked outside like an offering. "We can't stay long," Chato said. "Raiders hunt us, Blackjack Tom. They want revenge for our escape." James's stomach tightened. Tom's name was a curse, a raider who'd plundered Apache lands, his cruelty a shadow over the flats. "What do they want?" he asked. Chato hesitated, then revealed a small, intricately woven pouch, its surface etched with symbols. "A tribal talisman. It marks our sacred rituals. Tom killed for it." The revelation hit James like a gust. Such relics were coveted, a lure that had ruined men, but Ilara's life and her family's safety were worth more. "I'll protect you," he said, his resolve firming, though doubt gnawed at him about the talisman's power. As the fire crackled, hoofbeats echoed in the distance, growing louder. James grabbed his rifle, Chato rising with a spear, Ilara clutching a knife from the warriors. Shadows loomed 3 raiders, their coats dusted with sand, their hats marked with Tom's gang insignia. The leader, a burly man with a scarred face, dismounted. "Harrow," he barked. "That woman's ours. Tom wants her back." James's jaw tightened. "She's free," he said, his rifle steady. "Ride off, or we fight." The man laughed, drawing a pistol. "You're a dead man, farmer." Lena moved like a shadow, her satchel striking the man's hand, disarming him. James fired, his shot grazing another rider's shoulder, sending them scattering. The third fled, shouting threats. "Tom will burn you out." James lowered his rifle, his heart pounding. Chato's eyes met his, a flicker of respect breaking through. "You didn't have to," he said. James wiped sweat from his brow, his scar itching. "Ain't right, what they did. I've got my own ghosts." They settled in, the family's gratitude a quiet bond. Chato offered James the pouch. "For your kindness," he said, "but it brings danger." The desert stretched vast, its silence a promise of more trials, but James's act of mercy had ignited a spark, a family forged in dust and peril, with Tom's wrath looming on the horizon. As the warriors began unloading materials to repair the barn, a flicker of hope stirred in James's chest, though he knew the peace was fragile. The next morning, as the sun climbed higher, the farmstead bore the scars of its isolation no more. Chato's warriors worked with practiced efficiency, hauling timber from the mesa and weaving thatch from desert grasses, their movements a silent testament to their gratitude. Ilara, her strength returning, joined them, her hands deft as she directed the rebuilding. James watched, his rifle still close, the weight of the pouch in his pocket a constant reminder of the danger that lurked beyond the horizon. The children, Lena, Sita, and Tano, played nearby, their laughter a rare sound that softened the edges of his grief. Yet the threat of Black Tom lingered, a shadow that promised to return. The Arizona desert unfurled like a relentless sea of red sand as James Harrow, Ilara, and the Apache kin led by Chato ventured away from sunburned flats, the sun dipping low to cast long shadows across the arid expanse. James led the way on foot, his sun-faded shirt patched with rough stitches clinging to his broad frame with sweat, his worn boots crunching through the shifting dunes, his pitchfork slung over his shoulder alongside his rifle. His face, rugged with a scar across his right temple, bore a mixture of determination and unease, his hazel eyes scanning the horizon for signs of Black Jack Tom's raiders, a quiet resolve battling the weight of his past solitude. Ilara walked beside him, her tattered buckskin dress fluttering, her wrists still raw from the shackles, her small woven pouch with the tribal talisman swaying at her waist, her brown eyes sharp with survival despite her exhaustion. Chato followed, his buckskin attire adorned with faded beads, his hands carrying a spear, his tall frame exuding a guardian's protectiveness, flanked by a dozen Apache warriors, their faces painted with earth tones, their weapons glinting in the fading light. The journey to a hidden Apache village near Dry Ridge, a 2-day trek, was their goal, but the desert held other trials to test their newfound alliance. Their water was scarce, the canteen they'd salvaged from sunburned flats reduced to a few tepid drops, their supplies dwindled to a strip of jerky and a handful of desert figs Ilara had foraged. The sun beat down, its heat a relentless adversary, the silence broken only by the rasp of their breathing, the crunch of sand, and the distant call of a buzzard circling overhead. James's mind churned with the previous day's events, his impulsive liberation of Ilara, the arrival of her kin, the threat of Tom. He'd freed her to ease his own guilt, but their presence now drew danger, a price he hadn't foreseen. He offered Ilara water, a gesture of goodwill, his hand trembling slightly. Ilara accepted, her eyes narrowing. "Why risk this for me?" she asked, her voice weak. James met her gaze, his scar itching under the sun. "Lost my wife once to this land's harshness. Can't leave you to die like that." Elara's expression softened, but suspicion lingered, a reflection of a life shaped by captivity and loss. Chato and the warriors walked with a quiet dignity, their buckskin garments rustling softly, the talisman catching the fading light. Chato shared their story as they moved, his voice low and resonant. Tom's raiders attacked our village, stole our horses, killed many. Elara was taken for leverage. We've tracked her since, fearing his wrath. Elara added, her tone firm. He chained me to force our surrender. A young warrior, Tala, muttered. He wants the talisman for our sacred rites. James's heart sank. The talisman was a magnet for death, a lure that had ruined men. But Elara's life and her family's safety were worth more. I'll keep you safe, he said, his resolve firming, though doubt gnawed at him about the relic's power. Their progress halted at midday when they reached a trading post tucked into a dry arroyo, dry gulch, a haven for outlaws and wanderers. James needed supplies, his stores depleted after the fire. But Elara tensed. Danger here, she warned. Men talk. James nodded, his rifle ready. Inside, the air was stifling, the stench of sweat and stale tobacco thick. A trader named Pete Larson, a wiry man with a crooked grin and shifty eyes, leaned against a crate, his gaze narrowing. James Harrow, he said. Heard you took in an Apache captive. Tom's offering a bounty. James's jaw tightened, his past with raiders flashing. Mind your own, Pete. Larson smirked, his gaze on the pouch. $200 says I tell him where you're headed. Elara's pouch flashed, striking Larson's arm, forcing him back. Speak, and you bleed, she hissed. James stepped forward, his rifle aimed. Walk away, Pete. This ain't your fight. Larson paled, retreating, his laughter echoing. Tom'll hunt you down. James cursed under his breath. Larson's treachery would lead Tom straight to Dry Ridge. We move now, he said. The family's respect grew, their trust a tentative thread. You're brave, Tala said. James shook his head, the weight of his past pressing down. I've been a fool. The ambush came at dusk. Hoofbeats thundered through the sand, and 4 of Tom's men, led by a scar-faced rider named Red Jack, surrounded them near a rocky outcrop. Hand over the woman, farmer, Red Jack barked, his rifle raised. James fired, his shot grazing Red Jack's arm, sending him staggering. Elara threw a rock, striking another's shoulder, while Chato's spear felled a third. James's second shot dropped a rider, the outcrop falling silent save for the wind's moan. The 4th fled, shouting threats. Tom'll burn you out. They took cover behind the rocks, bandaging minor cuts, the heat seeping into their exhaustion. Chato's eyes met James's, her suspicion easing. You fight for us, she said. James wiped sweat from his brow, his scar itching. Ain't right what Tom did. I've got blood on my hands from men like him. Elara nodded, her pain surfacing. He killed my brother for the talisman. James's breath caught the relic was the key, a prize worth killing for. We'll keep it safe, he said, his resolve hardening. Their bond deepened as they rested. James sharing his canteen, Elara offering figs from her pouch. Why carry that talisman? He asked. Elara held it up, its symbols glowing faintly. It guides to our sacred ground. Tom murdered for it. James's heart ached, his losses echoing hers. I lost my wife to fever, lived alone since. Tala's gaze softened. We're all broken then. Maybe we heal together. The night stretched ahead, the desert vast, but the threat of Tom grew. James taught Lena to use his pitchfork, her hands steady despite her fatigue, their partnership a lifeline. Chato showed him Apache tracking signs, their trust aflame against the desert's grip. You're strong, James said. Lena smiled, a rare light in her eyes. You too, brother. The family watched, their kinship deepening, a bond forged in the crucible of the desert, but the peace was fleeting. Hoofbeats returned, closer now, Red Jack and his men, relentless as the sun. James chose a defensible ridge, setting up with the group behind rocks. We fight if we must, he said, his rifle ready. Chato nodded, her spear poised. Red Jack's men appeared, their rifles glinting. Last chance, Harrow, Red Jack shouted. James fired, his shot dropping a rider, but an arrow grazed Chato's arm, drawing a cry. Lena shielded her, her pouch a talisman, while Tano's men struck, their spears felling too, forcing the attackers to retreat. They bandaged Chato's arm, James's hands gentle. You're all my family now, he said. Chato's eyes met his, a warmth breaking through. And you're ours. The desert tested them, its trials forging a bond. But Tom's wrath loomed larger, a storm they'd face together. Dry Ridge was near, but so was their reckoning. The Arizona desert sprawled like an unyielding crucible of red sand, its surface baking under the relentless glare of a midday sun that transformed the air into a shimmering furnace of heat and dust. James Harrow, Elara, and the Apache kin led by Chato pressed onward, the wagon creaking behind James's steady hands, the weary mule straining through the shifting dunes with a labored gait. James's sun-faded shirt, patched with rough stitches, clung to his broad frame with sweat, his worn boots sinking into the sand, his pitchfork slung over his shoulder alongside his rifle. His face, rugged with a scar across his right temple, bore a determined set, his hazel eyes scanning the horizon for signs of Blackjack Tom's raiders, a quiet resolve battling the weight of his past solitude. Elara walked beside him, her tattered buckskin dress fluttering, her wrists still tender from the shackles, her small woven pouch with the tribal talisman swaying at her waist, her brown eyes sharp with survival despite her exhaustion. Chato followed, his buckskin attire adorned with faded beads, his hands carrying a spear, his tall frame exuding a guardian's protectiveness, flanked by a dozen Apache warriors, their faces painted with earth tones, their weapons glinting in the fading light. The hidden Apache village near Dry Ridge, their destination, was a day's journey, but the desert held other trials to forge their resilience. Their water was nearly depleted, the canteen they'd salvaged from Dry Gulch reduced to a few tepid drops, their supplies dwindled to a single strip of jerky and a handful of desert figs Elara had foraged. The sun beat down, its heat a relentless adversary, the silence broken only by the rasp of their breathing, the creak of the wagon, and the distant call of a hawk circling overhead. James's mind wrestled with his past, his wife's death to fever, his years of isolation, a guilt that shadowed his every step. The presence of Elara and her kin, a mirror to his loneliness, stirred a compassion he'd buried, their resilience a challenge to his despair. "We need to find shade soon," James said, his voice hoarse from the dry air. Elara nodded, pointing to a faint shadow on the horizon. "There's a dry wash ahead. It might hold water," she replied, her Apache wisdom guiding them through the wasteland. The warriors' silence, broken only by soft murmurs, hinted at their vigilance. The talisman, a burden they carried together. They reached the dry wash as the sun peaked, its shade a fleeting mercy against the scorching heat. James checked the wagon, its wheels wobbling from the rough terrain, while Elara and a warrior named Tala scouted for signs of life, their movements quick despite their exhaustion. The wash offered a shallow pool, its water brackish but drinkable, a rare oasis in the desert's grip. James filled the canteen, offering it to Tala first, his hands trembling slightly. "Drink, friend," he said, the word warm with care. Tala accepted, his eyes softening. "Thank you, James," he murmured, a rare nod breaking through his stoic demeanor. The moment was brief, but it deepened their bond, a thread of trust weaving through their shared struggle. The desert's trial struck at noon. A sandstorm brewed on the horizon, a roiling wall of red dust that swallowed the sky, its roar a challenge to their endurance. "Get down!" James shouted, pulling Elara, Tala, and the wagon behind a boulder, the warriors joining them. The storm hit like a living entity, its force tearing at their clothes, dust clogging their throats and stinging their eyes. James shielded Elara with his body, Chato and the warriors huddling close, the tempest raging for hours, leaving them buried in drifts, their water spilled into the sand. As it passed, the desert revealed a new peril, a bandit trap, a pit concealed by sand, its stakes glinting near Tano's foot. James reacted instantly, yanking the boy back, the trap snapping shut inches from him. Elara's quick thinking with a stick dislodged the mechanism, saving them. "Good save," James said, his respect for her growing. Elara nodded, her gaze steady. "The desert tests us all," she replied. That night they camped in the wash's lee, a small fire their only warmth, its glow casting shadows on the rocky walls. The storm had delayed them, the village still a day away, and James's mind churned with guilt, his wife's death, his years of isolation, now this family's fight. Chato offered him a fig, his hands gentle. "You fight for us," he said. "Why?" James poked the fire, his face shadowed. "I turned away from aid once my wife paid for it. Can't do that again." Tano's eyes softened, his pain surfacing. "Tom killed our parents, took our home." The confession hung heavy, a mirror to James's regrets. Strength ain't just in safety, he said. It's in standing together. Lena leaned against him, her voice small. The talisman protects our ground. Tom wants it. James's heart ached, his losses echoing theirs. I lost my wife to fever, lived alone since. Alara's gaze met his, a warmth breaking through. We're all lost then. Maybe we find kin. Their talk was interrupted by a rustle. Apache figures emerged from the dusk, led by a stout woman with a painted face. I am Naya, Chato's sister, she said, her voice cautious. We saw the storm. Tom hunts you. She offered a water skin, her eyes on the children. You're alive, nieces and nephew. We thought you taken. Lena ran to her, tears in her eyes. James saved us. Naya nodded, offering James a feathered cord. Your kin now, farmer. The reunion was brief but heartfelt. Naya's warriors, 15 strong, joined them, their spears glinting. Tom's tracker, Red Jack, is near, Naya warned. He won't stop. James's heart steadied, his bond with the family a shield. We fight together, he said. Sita's hand found his, her trust a beacon. You're our uncle, she whispered. The words warmed him. A redemption he hadn't sought. The peace shattered at dawn. Hoofbeats echoed Red Jack and 10 riders, their rifles ready. Naya's men melted into the rocks, leaving James and the family exposed. Run, Naya whispered, but James stood firm, his rifle raised. Red Jack's voice cut through the heat. Give up the kids, Harrow, or die. James fired, his shot grazing a rider, but an arrow struck Alara's arm, drawing a cry. Lena shielded her, her satchel a talisman, while Naya's men felled 3, forcing Red Jack to retreat. They bandaged Alara's arm, James's hands gentle. You're all my family now, he said. Alara's eyes met his, a warmth breaking through. And you're ours. The desert tested them, its trials forging a bond. But Tom's wrath loomed larger, a storm they'd faced together. Dry Ridge was near, but so was their reckoning. Dry Ridge rose like a rugged sentinel across the Arizona desert, its rocky plateau of red sandstone and weathered outcrops standing defiant against the encroaching dusk. The sun dipped low, casting a fiery glow across the ridge's rim, the air thick with the scent of sun-scorched earth and the faint promise of a cooling night breeze. James Harrow, Alara, and the Apache kin led by Chato and Naya prepared for their stand, the tension palpable in the stillness. James's sun-faded shirt, patched with rough stitches, was torn at the sleeve, his worn boots caked with dust and blood from his grazed side, his pitchfork and rifle poised despite the ache in his muscles. His face, rugged with a scar across his right temple, bore a grim determination, his hazel eyes shadowed by the weight of his past solitude. Alara stood beside him, her tattered buckskin dress fluttering, her arm wound bandaged, her small woven pouch with the tribal talisman clutched tightly, her brown eyes sharp with survival. Chato, his buckskin attire adorned with faded beads, wielded a spear, his tall frame exuding a guardian's protectiveness, while Naya, her face painted with earth tones, carried a bow, her presence a steady force. The journey to this refuge had forged their bond, now tested by Blackjack Tom's relentless pursuit. The ridge offered strategic ground, steep drops for ambushes, rocky outcrops for cover, and a narrow pass for traps. James fortified a vantage point with Chato's men, his hands calloused from years of farming, now skilled in war. Alara rigged tripwires with sinew, her movements precise despite her exhaustion, her pouch a constant reminder of their burden. The warriors assisted, stacking stones with precision, their vigilance unwavering. Tom wants the talisman, Alara said, her voice low and strained. He'll kill us for it. James nodded, his guilt over past inaction fueling his resolve. We hold him here, he replied. A warrior named Tala handed him a sharpened stake, a silent pledge of unity, the weapon's weight a comfort in his hands. Naya distributed spears and arrows, her warriors blending into the ridge's shadows, their movements silent and deadly. Red Jack leads them, she warned. He's close. James's heart steadied, his bond with the family a shield against the encroaching dark. We fight as kin, he said. Alara's eyes met his, a flicker of trust breaking through her pain. You're my brother, she said, her words a balm to his wounded spirit. The sentiment lingered, a redemption he hadn't dared hope for, as the wind carried the distant sound of approaching hooves. As dusk deepened, the air grew taut with anticipation, the ridge's silence broken by the crunch of boots on gravel. Blackjack Tom rode in with a dozen men, Red Jack at his side, the tracker's scar-faced grin a harbinger of violence. Tom, a broad man in a black coat lined with stolen hides, dismounted and called out, his voice a thunderclap against the cliffs. "Harrow, hand over the woman and that talisman, or this ridge becomes your pyre." James stepped forward, his rifle raised, his voice firm despite the heat. "You'll have to take them over my dead body, Tom," he shouted, his breath visible in the cooling air. The clash erupted like a desert tempest. Tom's men charged, their rifles and revolvers spitting fire through the dusk. James's first shot dropped a rider, the bullet finding its mark with a precision honed by years of necessity. Chato's warriors struck from the shadows, their spears felling two more, their movement silent and deadly. Ilara triggered a tripwire, a dynamite cache salvaged from an old trader's stash exploding and sending a shower of sand and rock, scattering the attackers. But Tom's numbers were overwhelming, and Red Jack's rifle was a relentless predator, his bullet grazing James's leg, drawing a sharp hiss of pain. Ilara pulled him behind a boulder, her arm wound seeping anew. "Stay alive," she growled, loosing a knife that struck a man's chest, her aim unwavering despite her fatigue. The ridge became a battlefield, its echoes ringing with gunfire and the thud of falling bodies. James fired again, dropping another rider, the heat numbing his hands but not his resolve. Chato's warriors fought with primal fury, their spears piercing the fray, while the warriors and Tala lobbed rocks, their forms a surprising force. But Tom's voice cut through the chaos. "Ilara, give me the talisman's secret, or they all die." He held a pistol to Chato's head, the warrior's spear shattered, his eyes defiant. Ilara's heart sank, her pouch clutched tight. "No," she cried, her voice raw with emotion. James's mind raced. He couldn't lose another family. He signaled Chato's men to hold, his gaze locking with Ilara's, a silent plea for a plan. Ilara stepped forward, her stance defiant despite her wounds. "Tom betrayed my tribe," she shouted, her voice carrying over the wind. "He sold our people to settlers for land, left us to die when we fought." The revelation hit James like a thunderclap. Tom's greed wasn't just for the talisman, but for the sacred ground it marked, a secret her tribe had guarded. Tom laughed, his pistol steady. "Then you all die with your lies." But Ilara moved, shoving James and the warriors aside as Red Jack fired, the bullet tearing through her chest. She fell, blood pooling in the dust, her pouch slipping from her grasp. "James, no!" he roared, lunging to her side, his hands trembling as he pressed against the wound. Chato's warriors charged, their spears a blur, felling 3 men in a surge of vengeance. Tala struck with a rock, stunning a rider, while Naya's arrow found another's leg. James tackled Red Jack, their struggle a tangle of fists and sand, until his pitchfork pierced the tracker's side, ending the threat. Tom roared, charging with his pistol, but Chato's spear struck his arm, bringing him down. The remaining raiders fled, their horses vanishing into the dusk. James knelt beside Ilara, his hands stained with her blood, his heart breaking as he tried to stem the flow. "Hold on," he pleaded, his voice cracking with emotion. Her eyes met his, a faint smile breaking through the pain. "You're my brother now," she rasped. "Protect them. The talisman is our future." Her hand fell, her spirit slipping into the desert's embrace, her sacrifice a final act of trust. Naya bound Tom, her men finishing the fight, the ridge falling silent, save for the wind's mournful wail. Tom was defeated, his men scattered, but Ilara's loss was a wound deeper than the heat. James cradled her, tears mixing with the dust on his face, the weight of her words sinking in. Lena, Sita, and Tano approached, placing the pouch, blanket, and toy on her chest. "She was our sister," Lena said, her voice thick. "Now she's with our parents." The Apache carried her to a pyre, their chants rising, a tribute to her courage that echoed through the ridge. James stood, his guilt eased by her forgiveness, his promise to protect the children, a new purpose. The ridge smoldered, the air heavy with loss and victory. Naya offered James a place with the tribe, and he nodded. "I'll honor her at the village," he said, his voice steady. The journey to Dry Ridge had broken Tom's grip, but Ilara's sacrifice would resonate in the desert silence. James's redemption was hers, and the talisman her people's legacy would remain guarded. The dawn broke over Dry Ridge, a fragile light spilling across the red sands, where the embers of Ilara's pyre glowed like the last whispers of a fading hope. The air was thick, with the lingering scent of smoke and the dry, earthy aroma of the desert, the vast Arizona wilderness reclaiming the battlefield with a quiet, unyielding peace. James Harrow stood at the ridge's edge, his sun-faded shirt torn and dusted with ash, his worn boots planted firmly in the sand, his pitchfork and rifle resting against a boulder. His face, rugged with a scar across his right temple, bore the weight of grief, his hazel eyes glistening with unshed tears, the guilt of his past solitude softened by Ilara's final words. The woven pouch with the tribal talisman, her strange reward, hung around his neck on a cord, a symbol of the kinship that had brought him to this moment. Blackjack Tom, bound and defeated, slumped against a rock, his raider reign shattered, his greed no match for the courage of a farmer and his newfound family. Chato, Naya, Tala, and the Apache warriors stood nearby, their painted faces etched with both loss and pride, while the desert wind carried the faint cries of the children Lena, Sita, and Tano, whose hope had been kindled anew. The Apache warriors, led by Chato and Naya, moved with a solemn reverence, their faces mirroring the ridge's crimson hues as they gathered around Ilara's pyre. The flames had dwindled to a gentle glow, the sand around it darkened by melted wax and ash, a testament to her sacrifice. Chato knelt, offering a prayer in Apache, his voice a deep chant that reverberated through the cliffs, honoring a sister who had transcended her role as a captive and protector. James watched, his hands trembling as he placed her knife once her defiance onto the pyre, a silent vow to carry her legacy forward. Lena, Sita, and Tano joined him, adding their satchel, blanket, and toy, their offerings a tribute to her courage. "She saved us," Lena said, her voice soft but resolute. "You kept her promise." James nodded, the words a balm to his wounded soul, a redemption he hadn't dared to claim. The journey to the hidden Apache village began, the warriors carrying the pyre's remnants through the ridge's rocky pass, its ashes a sacred burden. The trail was treacherous, the sand shifting underfoot, the heat of the day giving way to a cooling breeze that carried the promise of renewal. James walked with them, his leg aching from the graze but his spirit lifted by their unity. The village emerged a sheltered valley nestled between towering mesas, its floor dotted with mesquite and a faint shimmer of a spring fed by an underground stream. The Apache survivors greeted them, their faces etched with grief for Ilara but warmth for her savior. Naya led James to the spring, its waters clear and life-giving, reflecting the cavern walls adorned with painted symbols and woven mats, a sanctuary Ilara had died to protect. "Her spirit guards this place," Naya said. "You are kin." The tribe gathered around a fire that night, the valley's walls amplifying their voices as they shared tales of Ilara's bravery. Her gifts to James, her trust, the talisman were now symbols of her legacy, their weight heavier than the sacred ground they marked. They offered him a place among them, their eyes reflecting gratitude and hope. "You fought for her," Chato said, handing him a woven mat. "Stay, and find peace." James hesitated, his mind drifting to his past, a farmer broken by drought and loss, his wife's death a guilt he'd carried like a stone. Ilara's words, "You're my brother," echoed, her sacrifice a key to unlock that prison. "I'll stay," he said finally, "but I'll bring my skills to your valley. With your help." The days that followed were a blend of mourning and rebuilding. The Apache taught James their ways, how to channel the spring's water for crops, how to weave mats from agave, how to honor the land with rituals by the spring. Lena, Sita, and Tano became his shadows, the children's knowledge of their mother's traditions complementing James's farming expertise. They constructed a new adobe home near the spring, its walls rising under their hands, a fusion of Apache resilience and James's craftsmanship. The desert, once a place of solitude, became a bridge between worlds, its silence broken by the tribe's laughter and the trickle of water. The warriors, under Chato's guidance, began laying plans to rebuild James's burned farmstead, their hands working in harmony with the land, a promise of restoration taking root. One evening, as the sun set, painting the valley in shades of orange and purple, James stood at the spring's edge, the woven pouch a constant reminder. Lena, Sita, and Tano joined him, holding a new satchel, blanket, and toy crafted by the tribe. "For us?" Sita asked. James nodded, his eyes misting as he handed them out. "Your sister would want you to have them," he said. Tano smiled, a rare light in his young face. "She gave us a home," the sentiment lingered, a bond forged in the crucible of the desert, strengthened by the promise of rebuilding that echoed in the warriors' efforts. The tribe celebrated with a feast, their songs filling the valley, Alara's name woven into the melodies. James learned her story in full, how she'd been captured to force her tribe's surrender, how she'd hidden the talisman to save their heritage, how her spirit now watched over them. His past, his failure to save his wife, his years of isolation faded against her forgiveness. He wasn't just a farmer anymore, but a guardian, a brother, to those he'd once failed. Naya approached, offering a carved wooden bowl. "Lead with her strength," she said. James took it, his hand steady. "I will." Weeks later, the valley thrived, its spring nourishing new crops, its people strengthened by James's aid. The Apache warriors, true to their word, began the journey back to Sunburn Flats, bringing materials in hands to rebuild James's original farmstead, transforming the charred ruins into a symbol of renewal. He rebuilt his life, the tribe's help a lifeline, their stories a balm to his loneliness. Ilara's knife hung above the new home's door, a shrine to her sacrifice, its blade a silent witness. The desert stretched vast, its red sands a testament to their fight, but it was no longer a place of solitude. James's redemption was complete, not in land, but in the family he'd found: Lena, Sita, Tano, Chato, Naya, the tribe all bound by Ilara's legacy. As the sun rose over Dry Ridge, its golden light bathed the valley and the distant silhouette of the reborn farmstead, a promise of a new beginning. James stood at the home's threshold, the wooden bowl at his side, the woven pouch gleaming. He was no longer just a farmer who'd freed a captive, but a brother to a woman whose courage had saved him, whose talisman had turned peril into a legacy of strength. The desert whispered her name, and James carried it forward, a restored haven born from the ashes of sacrifice, with the promise of a rebuilt home anchoring their future.